Concern is rising over a growing global food crisis as the war in Iran disrupts fertilizer supplies, pushing up prices and threatening harvests worldwide. The CEO of Yara, a major producer, says the shortages could mean up to 10 billion fewer meals every week. Fertilizer prices have already increased by 80% since the war began, raising the cost for farmers and increasing the risks of a bidding war over food supplies. With the biggest impact expected in poorer countries, especially in Africa, Yara warns of a global auction, leaving them unable to afford supplies. Well, let's talk now to Laurie Laybourn, the Executive Director of the Strategic Climate Risks Initiative. Laurie, welcome. We're hearing warnings that the Iran war could trigger food shortages in Africa. What is the link between this conflict and global food supply?
We can think about this directly and indirectly. So the direct link is that food moves through the Strait of Hormuz, and if it's closed, there's going to be less food moving through. But the bigger concern is the effect on the things that we need to make food, particularly energy and, as you were just saying, fertilizer. A lot of fertilizer moves through the strait in normal times, but Gulf nations themselves are also a major producer of fertilizer. They often use natural gas to create ammonia, providing something like a third of the supply of that fertilizer, and there are many more as well. So together you're getting less food moving around the world, and then you're getting far less and therefore more expensive inputs into the creation of food, and those together are what is causing a lot of concern about a threat to global food supply.
Let's be optimistic. Let's hope this war is over by Christmas. Fertilizer prices have increased, supply chains disrupted. How quickly could this start to impact harvests and food prices, or might it all be resolved relatively in short order?
Well, it's already having an effect by there being these surges in prices for things like fertilizers. You mentioned earlier the rise of about 80% when it comes to fertilizer prices. That is going to have an effect pretty quickly in the sense that there will be less use of fertilizer because it's more expensive. And if it's more expensive, you can't afford it, you're going to use less of it, which could then lead to less abundant harvests. And that's a particular concern across Africa and also into the Asian subcontinent as well, because their planting season for a number of crops is now coming up. And these are places that are also disproportionately dependent on fertilizer moving through the Gulf region as well. Now, there will then, of course, be somewhat of a delay in that those harvests will then have to grow through, and then we'll see prices rising off the back of that. But all of this, we're already seeing the effects now. It's somewhat buffered by there having been a bumper global cereal crop recently and a number of countries pre-purchasing stocks of fertilizer. But if you are a lower income country, you have had less of that pre-purchasing, so you are much more vulnerable, and so that effect is hitting you straight away.
I remember standing here during the COVID pandemic talking about how on earth the world food chain was brought to its knees by the pandemic, and it seems we're back here again having another conversation about the world's dependence on a very narrow stretch of water.
Absolutely. And we've now, the third major global supply chain shock in 6 years, happening once every 2 years at the moment. And that kind of tells you that these are just not just one-off occurrences, that there's actually something very vulnerable and fragile about the food systems that we have globally. And we're going to have to do something about this, because the more that this goes on, the more that there will be a compounding effect. It's not just a one-off and then you're able to recover. This is coming so fast now, these disruptions, that it's very hard for some places to recover. And in mentioning that, let's look slightly toward the future. You mentioned there the hope that the war will be over as soon as possible. There could be another threat coming straight at us, which is the next round of climate extremes. So the El Nino cycle is moving into its hot phase, and there are concerns among scientists that climate change is supercharging that so much that we could see an unprecedented array of climate shocks happening as we head through the rest of this year and into next year. That is a perfect storm, literally and figuratively, particularly for low-income nations. So this is another reminder, halfway through the 2020s, that we need to get on top of the vulnerabilities in our global food system so that we can actually weather that climate shock to come.
Laurie, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show. Laurie Laybourn, the Executive Director of the Strategic Climate Risks Initiative.